Hey, you guys. It's Sadesh, and we're back today with CloudStream. And, what's really exciting is today I'm talking to somebody that I really admire, Marjorie, and she's built, I think, a following and a career around solution engineering, and she's taken a really unique path. First of all, Marjorie, I'd like you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do and how you do it. And then I've got more questions, of course.
Yeah, no, hey, super excited to be here, Sadesh, and thanks for inviting me on your show. It's funny you say the talk around passion around solution engineering. I think we'll definitely talk into that a little bit more, but that's definitely a good descriptor. But Marjorie Abdelkrime, I always like to say that people should be very bold in how they introduce themselves. So I actually won't say my title, but why I'm here. And I'm here today because I am truly passionate about helping folks develop their career and really think about the next step and how they get there. And a lot of times, many of us think that we don't have people who want to help us, but we really do, right? There's a lot of folks in the industry that really want to extend that hand. And that's what I want to do today. And hopefully, you all will get that from our conversation. To the more traditional introduction, I do lead the multi-cloud architecture and strategist team here at VMware. We help our customers think about their multi-cloud strategy and journey and how they get to the cloud.
Nice. And one thing I ask all my guests is, Marjorie, is how do you get to where you are? And the reason that I always ask this question is because there's so many different paths, and folks are always talking about ladders, but I feel like a lot of times it's a vertical maze that folks kind of navigate to get to where they are. And so I'd like to learn a little bit more about that. Like, what'd you do? How'd you figure it out? That kind of thing.
Oh gosh, yeah. I think that is such a good description of it. There isn't a ladder. There isn't a book that says here's the path. But I will say that the path to becoming an SE and moving into leadership is becoming a little bit more prescriptive. There are folks in the industry who are trying to put some more meat around how to get here. But I started in support, right? So I came through the hard knocks world of dealing with end users and helping them figure out how to just turn on their computers. To getting to this point has really been a matter of being willing to try something new. And the reason why I say that is, a lot of times when I talk to individuals about their career development, they're like, oh no, I don't qualify for that. Or I'm not ready for that yet. And I think if I had taken that path of I'm not ready yet, I don't think I'd be here. Thankfully, I have had mentors and sponsors throughout my career who've always said, hey, Marjorie, there's this new thing. So from support, I went into desktop support. So I did telephone support, help desk, and then I went to desktop support and was able to start learning about Exchange and infrastructure and collaboration. And the way I entered the vendor world is I had a sales rep who said, I was like 23 at the time, and he was like, hey, Marjorie, he's like, there's this thing called consulting, and I think you do really good at it. You should apply for the job. And I'm like, what's consulting? What do I do? Like, I was used to, being in a server room trying to fix Exchange systems. And the rest is history from there. I think a lot of the other opportunities throughout my career have always been, hey, Marjorie, have you considered this? And a lot of times we don't hear it and we miss that opportunity. And hopefully that's something that we'll be able to talk a little bit more about as we talk about career progression.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I like to kind of summarize points, right? So what I heard there are, look for those opportunities. Don't be afraid to take them on. We all at different points in our lives have to catch balls we're not ready to catch yet, and that can be personal, professional, whatever. And I really like that approach. Now, one of the things that I remember from our discussion was that you are also kind of passionate about helping others grow into the solution engineering, solution architecture, overall solutioning, I think, framework. And with that, you've got kind of a couple of initiatives that you're working on, and one of them is new grads to SE. can you tell us a little bit about what that's all about? Because I think it's exciting if you're coming out of school, starting to figure out where you want to be, or what color your balloon is, or whatever
Yeah.
those things are. And what does that look like? What are you doing there, and how are you helping folks?
Yeah. So I have a good friend of mine that also works here at VMware. Her name is Yvette Edwards. And
Hmm.
she started this organization called National Society of Solution Engineers with
Yeah.
several college students a couple of years ago. And this organization, it's so interesting that this thing popped into my life at the time that it did. I was talking to a couple folks and I'm like, I look at the industry, especially as you think of infrastructure, right, in the space that we're in. It's a very
Right.
mature industry. Many of us have been here for many years. And I always thought, I was like, how do we get kind of younger, fresh talent, people who will help us think differently about the world as we move forward? And if that's like, hey, we're actually starting this thing called
Yeah.
NSSE, and you should get involved. And it's such a great group of guys and girls that really are passionate about introducing the SE career into different universities. What
Yep.
they do is they help students understand what the role is. And now they have clubs all over the country in different universities. In fact, VMware sponsors one of the clubs. And what we do is we come on site and we talk about, VMware, we talk about the SE role. In addition to that, annually, there is a conference where all of the students who are part of these sales clubs come and compete. And I love it because they get into these meetings, to do discovery questions, and then they'll come and do a presentation. And sometimes I am so impressed with these students. I'm like, y'all need to come and
Yeah.
teach some of the RSCs how to do discovery calls because they do really
Right.
well.
Great. And so, one of the things, first of all, I started out working with Yvette's team, and I have to say, amazing culture that she's created, as well as just a lot of passion
Yes.
in growing, I think, these career paths. And how does somebody find out about that? What's the best way? Because I think at any grads that are out there listening probably may want to check that out.
Yeah, National Society. Gosh, I need to look up the link because I don't remember.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. I always mess it up. I think it's National.
Yeah.
Live. I'll tell you guys the website here. It's National Society of Sales Engineers. So it's nationalssc.org.
Okay.
Check that out. They've got a contact page there. And if you're a student and you're looking to enroll your university or want to start your own SE club, they can help you figure that all out.
That is super cool. I'll make sure we get that posted after the show. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, as folks who are both, I'll call ourselves midlife. How's that? Right. And considering later career, as solution engineers, I think what's unique about the profession is that essentially you have so many derivative career options or growth patterns that you could follow. Some folks are, going on and they want to be a principal engineer and they want to go on to products. Other folks are like, hey, sales is my journey. That's that's my jam. And even other folks, might be doing, marketing and other things like that. Now, what have you kind of learned around mid career, later career? What's helped shape what you've kind of made around decisions, and as things change, like how have you kind of considered opportunities as you think around those things?
Yeah, so there's a couple aspects to that, right? One is, like you talked about, folks who are in different careers and they're looking at, this career. I call it the career of the future when I talk about this topic, and they're looking to make the transition. The big question is, how do I make the transition? And I've met so many individuals, both outside of VMware and inside of VMware, who made that pivot mid part of their career, right? They saw like, hey, this is a very it's a very financially rewarding role. You get to keep your technical chops, and you get to meet customers and meet new people all the time. And for folks that are looking at that mid-career switch, one, it's about looking at the companies that you work for. There is an SE role that exists. If you're in a software company, and these days every company says that they're a software company, there's going to be some form of an SE role. And actually, even hardware companies, we got to our last case that I talked about was actually with a windmill provider, which was awesome. But anyway, yeah, I know we got to see SEs for a windmill provider as part of that conference. So from mid-career switch, I would say definitely ask around in your company. What are the technical selling roles that exist in your company? There's different names to it. There's solution consultant, there's demo engineers. There's so many different titles for it. So do some asking around. And I think if you have the ability to talk about the solution that you're passionate about, and you're able to explain it in simple terms, and you're able to ask questions to understand, what the business needs are from a customer, then that's all you need, right? That makes you an SE. I think everyone can be an SE, and if you're interested in becoming a solution engineer, definitely do that. For folks that are currently SEs and that are looking to continue to grow, I think the conversation is really around one, the path that you want to take, right? Because there's a traditional, let me go super technical and go up the CTO type route. And then there's the leadership route. And I think that conversation, I have that with folks fairly often. Like, you don't have to be a manager to move up. If you want to continue down a technical path, you can do that. You just need to define what that is. And for folks who are looking at that, I think it's also about learning, adjacent technologies, maybe even looking at starting fresh with something completely new, right? Many of us at VMware, we're infrastructure people. Throw us into some SaaS application type of end user, we'll be, swimming pretty aggressively because we will need to figure out how to get to the other side of the pond. But I think it's a great opportunity for folks to learn new solutions as they're looking to build out their careers.
Nice. And, I think I would take away a couple of points from that. The first is don't assume that you know all of the different paths or technical roles that exist, because a lot of times we only can see where our headlights are pointing. And a lot of times that's, straight ahead, right? And there are all these peripheral capabilities that an organization needs, especially as it scales out, that may or may not be filled. And I think knowing about those opportunities and asking about them is probably great as an SE. Doing the same discovery process you do with your customer on your career path, I think is probably ideal. And then there was something else that you mentioned that I thought was great as well, which is as folks are scaling for growth, a lot of times this means taking on new skill sets, and whether those are technical or non-technical skill sets. That may be, you mentioned leadership, but you also mentioned, hey, I'm going to go figure this new thing out. Artificial intelligence and machine learning as it applies to operations automation, how does that work? Those types of things. So I think what's neat about that is scaling in your role. So maybe you specialize in your role and help start building out that capability as you kind of go up. And I think the other thing that was really great was don't always assume that you have to be a manager, right? Being a leader means that you're finding things, you're picking them up, and you're helping to show the team how to scale and grow in those different ways. And I like that as well. So the next thing is we're doing a little bit of a pivot. So we've talked a lot about career growth, et cetera, and now we're going to talk a little bit about multi-cloud. And so your charge currently is addressing all things multi-cloud, and let me just say that's a big ocean to swim in. And the area here that I was really kind of interested in, because you see so many different customer situations, your teams are responsible for triaging across such a broad range of problem domains. What is the overall customer journey towards multi-cloud? And when I prompt you with this, I'm more thinking about, when does a customer realize that they're going to need to adopt multiple platforms as the business dictates? And how do they come to the realization that should be somewhat managed in a mature manner and those things? So that's kind of where my head is on that topic. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So I think the realization point, from an industry perspective, I think a lot of customers are are either there or they're almost there, right?
Mhm.
And they've come to the point where they're either considering some type of hybrid cloud deployment, right? In addition to multiple clouds, is really about thinking about the applications that they're working with. And I think that's the first question that when we get involved is, well, what are we trying to solve for? What is
Mhm.
the technical issue, the business application that you're looking to apply this new cloud technology? Why are we making this move? And a lot of times customers, either they are reading about cloud technologies and they're excited about it, but when they sit down and they actually try to answer the why, it's a much more difficult question to answer than the I'm
Yeah.
ready, right?
Yeah.
And that's really one of the big things that we challenge our customers with, and really work through that process with them to help them understand what is it that they're looking to solve for. So that's I think item number one. Item number two, we actually did some research with an external firm, and we found that it's already at about a two cloud platform is where customers are already at, right? So they're
Yeah.
already using two different technologies. And the reason behind that is, one, this notion of availability and disaster recovery, right?
Mhm.
Having your resources in more than one egg basket, so to speak, right? It is really an area where we're seeing customers think about as they're thinking about their plans. And also many of them, it really comes down to business application. That's what makes them decide that it's time to go to the cloud. Now, the final piece, and this was interesting. I actually read about this last night. Yeah, as we all know,
Mhm.
reInvent is this week, so lots of news coming
Yes.
out from there. But one of the things that someone was talking about last night is that the notion of supply chain shortage is
Uh-huh.
now finally starting to hit home to many customers, and they're thinking about, okay, well, if supply chain issues are going to be limiting factor to how I run my infrastructure and environment, and it can potentially impact how quickly I can bring applications to market, I need to really start thinking about cloud. And
Mhm.
that is starting to become, I think, a more visible trend. I think it was already somewhat something that customers were thinking about, but now we're starting to see more of it, and it's becoming more visible.
Yeah, no, I think those are all very kind of interesting inflection points for customers that are making these decisions. Um, one of the things that I think about is when you take the customer journey for multi-cloud and then you overlay it with things like customer success and solution engineering as kind of a discipline. um, you see some unique challenges starting to form. And I think one of those unique challenges, going back to reInvent, was this week, is that a lot of customers start their cloud adoption journey on an assumption that this is the one thing that we're going to have to deal with for the rest of our lives, right? Most organizations operate this way, so that's not like you're like, hey, we're going to drink milk and it'll be milk for the rest of our lives until we all figure out that somebody's got a milk allergy and we got to switch to oat milk. And so, so that the thing is that as organizations are kind of figuring out that, most of the time the inflection point tends to be, hey, we've made a major adoption of a cloud platform or any other infrastructure platform. That could be data center, so that we already have, et cetera, et cetera. And now we're making this move from a customer standpoint. And I think what's challenging about that is, how do you see customers that realize that they're going to have to adopt something else um, deal with the obstacles to doing so? So they already set up all their stuff for this one thing, and now they're having to figure out how to make it work across more than one. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think from a customer perspective, I think realizing that the move to the cloud, although sometimes it can be easy and not overcomplicated, sometimes it is, right. Especially if you're looking at modernizing applications as part of that journey. So that's one area, right. If you're looking at modernizing apps and the success around that, and making sure that
Mhm.
you're doing that in a manner where you're thinking about the end goal, which is your customer and your business at the end of the day. And I think from a success standpoint, right, it's about looking at the holistic deployment of what you're looking to accomplish, and really putting together very detailed milestones and project plans around when are you going to be doing milestone one, what is it going to accomplish, what are the dependencies around it, And then what about milestone 2? How do we get to that? What are the risks and challenges and dependencies, et cetera, as we continue down this journey? And that's going to be extremely important. Our customer success organization works fairly closely with our customers to make sure that they're thinking about these aspects of their deployment. And obviously the SE team is there to help them think about this before, they actually take this journey on. But it's a complex one, right? Where we really have to think about the phased approach, because when you're moving a data center, would you just move a data center at a double click of a button? You don't, right? You have to think about it the same exact way.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about that as well is that it means that the career trajectory of an SE changes, because fundamentally, I'll say early career, when I was a solutions engineer, we just thought about how we build the solution and get it delivered to the customer. Now, in this current state world, I feel like we have to think about, well, what will happen with future delivery for iteration after iteration, and help the customer understand that they're either set up for success or they're going to have to work on the people and process side of their organization to calibrate for success ongoing. And I think that's one of the harder, it's one of the harder challenges across multi-cloud and multi-platform, especially in the context of what you just mentioned, application modernization, because we know that a lot of revenue is driven based on application modernization. Look at all the new e-commerce capability that customers had to build out in the last 2 years, and that's like the simplest example there. I think the other thing that comes into play here is this idea of consumption. So the reason I bring up this topic is that in the early days, when things were simpler, I like to say, people would just go buy a box of software, and along with their cereal, right? They would just install that, and perpetually that's what would be installed for the rest of time, right? Yeah. We all remember WordStar and those purchases early on in our careers. But I think what's different about this approach around cloud specifically is that it becomes a consumption journey for customers, and I akin this a lot to, have I ever looked at my cell phone bill and has it ever gone down in the last decade? And the answer to that question is no. No, it hasn't. Yes. Yeah. And that's because consumption has increased year over year for cellular devices in my household, right? And for a lot of customers, they're going through that same, I'll call it growing pains. And yes, some of them consider switching, right? Which means multi-cloud, right? Others also consider, well, how can I optimize or how can I innovate, right? Well, we can all use one phone. Well, that brings problems of its own, right? And so, as I think about this consumption journey overall and the problems that organizations face, SEs are here to help. I'm curious, how do you think about what that means for the SE community as they're starting to realize, oh, well, our customers have these new problems that are not packaged software problems, but are really long-term. How do I make these right decisions to help my organization stay afloat financially, as well as making smart use of my cloud resources?
Yeah, I think part of that is the operations, right? Operations management and making sure that as you're deploying, that you're considering the business needs and what the growth capacity is going to look like. And really, we've got tools to help with that monitoring of resources, how much you're using, where you're using it, how can you optimize, right? And I think using tools like ours or others, right, depending on what folks are doing, but obviously we're the VMware cloud stream here, so I can talk about VMware, right? So we should definitely be leveraging, Cloud Health and the cloud management platforms and solutions that we have as a company to be able to help our customers understand how are they using the tools and how are they using the utilization from a capacity perspective and compute and storage and whatnot, so that they can make the best decisions to optimize their environment. I think that's extremely important. And I think from a consumption standpoint, for SEs, that's become the new responsibility of their job.
Yes.
And not just at VMware, I think across the industry, you said it right. We would sell and then walk away and then we were done. no longer the case. Right now, we need to make sure that we're helping our customer make those decisions so that they're properly consuming the product going forward.
Yeah, and one thing that comes to mind, I think you identified operations, but one thing that we as a team have built is that whole cloud operating model, and many of the reasons that we've kind of put those things together is because we've had so many customer conversations that are much like our cell phone bill conversation, where people look at it and they're just like, well, how did we get to this? Right? Where did we think that we thought, thousands of text messages were going to be unlimited, right? What happened here? And these models help to make decisions for organizations. And I feel like SEs are going back to consulting, they're the consultants that help you say, well, we've seen 3 or 4 customers this month that have had these same challenges, and here are the paths they took, et cetera, to making these decisions overall. And there's some business value consideration here, and that's kind of my next question for you, right? Is this becomes a new paradigm for SEs in a lot of organizations. They go from being what would have traditionally been a technical engineering role to a role that is required to start to convey things like, well, what applications are you really working with? And do these things affect revenue? And how do you think about revenue, Mrs. Customer, Mr. Customer? And I think this is a new topic overall for SEs is, for a long time, we at VMware have always done ROI and TCO analysis, but those really take care of widgets, meaning how many servers do you have and how quickly can you deploy them and make them flexible and useful to you. And now we're starting to have conversations that are, well, what's your business actually going to want to do? Well, we're going to want to scale out on AWS over the next 3 to 5 year period. Yeah. And we plan to deploy all our e-commerce there. And on top of that, we're planning to add some of our data processing over on GCP so that we can take care of the ingest, et cetera, et cetera. And as SEs are having these conversations, they're starting to have business value conversations to understand the path that these customers are taking and whether relative to what they're making from a decision standpoint is impactful for the organization at large. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. I'll call it this expanding space that broadens the role of the SE in any conversation.
Yeah, now the SE needs to be an expert on the customer's customer, right? So let's say you're selling to a bank. You now need to know from a bank's perspective, what is it that they're trying to do for their end customer? Is it a mobile application? Are they trying to have better, quicker, cash transfers, for example, right? You now end up becoming an expert also in that specific industry so that you can then help them make the best recommendations based off of that, right? Based off of their end business. And, it comes down to, you'll hear it called value selling. I see a comment, consultative selling from Chris.
Yeah.
That is definitely the new approach that the SE is having to take. And the SE now also needs to realize that they are not only selling to a technical buyer, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times when we're coaching SEs to build relationships with their customer, you ask them like, what is the customer being goaled on? Go ask them that question. And
how are they being measured?
Right. How are they being measured? What are their success factors that they need to be considering and help them achieve that? And that is through understanding the business side of things. So it's definitely evolving. We go through the SE versions, right? So I think right now, I don't know if we're on 3 or 4, I think we've gone to 4.0. So we're in SE 4.0 from a version career perspective. You look at kind of the transition over history and over time over what the SE has done to help customers. It's definitely very different. But I will say that there's an increased need for technical aptitude as well. So you not only need to know the business, you need to know your technology really well, because the customer doesn't always have all the tools available to them, and you become that person that helps them understand it.
Yeah, what's interesting is if you think about the way that you just described that, it maps really well to the current themes that are happening in the technology platform space. So if we're putting, we used to have VMs, now we have Kubernetes. On top of Kubernetes, we have microservices, and so on top of microservices, we have some service mesh API stuff, right? All of those are interconnected pieces and parts of the technology portfolio that the customer may be consuming, and taken together with what they're consuming from a business value and a business measure standpoint, it gets very complicated for a single decision maker or a group of decision makers to understand the overall picture. And I think some of the most successful presentations I've seen from your team has been the ability to integrate across these different domains and show the inflection points of business value across a technical decision maker stack.
Yeah.
And I love saying that that's the power of VMware, right? I feel like we have to have a 5-minute or 5-second spot there. But it's also the power of having great team members that know your customer outcome as well as your customers well, and where they're driving from a technology standpoint, so that their investments are well spent. Because that's overall what I feel like this comes to. Now, with that being said, there are a couple of passion projects that I think you are working on. And in our last 2 or 3 minutes here, I'd love to understand a little bit more about those. I feel it's super helpful to get to know what folks are kind of doing. And the first one is kind of women in tech. And I'd like to hear a little bit about what that is. And the second one is Dare to be Digital. What can you share there?
They're both I would say co-related, right? They're tied pretty well. And I think one of the big things is introducing and growing the diversity that we have, specifically in the SE ranks. We have, I think, in tech, generally speaking, parity's still not there, right? There just needs to be across tech. But in SE land, it's even worse, right? Our numbers are really struggling from a diversity standpoint, and definitely super passionate in making sure that we drive that here at VMware. I've started in partnership with several other folks, Women Allies in Sales Group, and it's meant to focus on, creating an environment for the sales and SE folks to feel like they have space to learn about, how to negotiate, your own salaries, for example. I gotta say, we sit through when we do some of these trainings for the team, and I'm like, oh, you know what, you're right. I don't do that either. I need to do a better job in just standing up for myself. So we do a lot of that, training for internal folks, and externally, I do make myself available to a lot of young women, specifically who are coming out of school, provide them some guiding and mentorship. And again, I learn a ton from the young women that I mentor to make sure that they're thinking about, bigger and better things for themselves as they're looking at their career. From a younger perspective, so several years ago, I started doing work with Dare to be Digital, and I moved out of the Bay Area, so I haven't been involved with them in a couple of years. But what they do is they go and they target the 7th to 11th grade group. And they basically help them understand all the different career paths that exist in tech. And, you'd say, well, Bay Area, like, why do you need to do that in the Bay Area? I think I was one of those cynics at first as well. And one of the sessions I was presenting in, young woman, probably in the 9th grade or something, she's like, technology is boring. I don't want to be a coder. And I was like, but there are so many other jobs that you could do with tech, right? Let's talk about being an SC. Let's talk about being a consultant. Tam, like, there's so many other things and you can be with customers. So I'm hoping I change your mind. But it's at that age, right? If we don't get them at that age and they don't realize what the career paths are, then we're going to lose the pipe, as we call it, the pipeline of young talent moving into tech roles. So we need to do more work in making sure that we're addressing that younger age group. Otherwise, we'll miss that opportunity. And the other thing that I do that I also haven't done in a couple of years, specifically with this organization, but is work with underserved communities. So there are companies like Year Up and Empower and IT Works. They do amazing work in making sure that they're bringing IT jobs to communities that normally wouldn't have been thinking about an IT job. And with Sal Campana, one of the regional SE leaders here in the Northeast, he's pulled me into a local organization here called Tech Impact. And again, we just go once a year. We present to them about VMware. They keep in touch afterwards on LinkedIn. And you never know the impact that you might have on that one person just by showing up. And I think it's super important that we always think about the community beyond the ones that we're a part of, and make sure that we're giving back.
Yeah. You know what was interesting as you were talking? One of the most impactful events that I did with my own daughter, and I think she was 7 or 8 at the time, is I invited her to come along to a career fair where we were representing VMware. And she, to this day, asks when she can go back to that career fair. She said, I just didn't know how many different types of jobs there were and how many different types of companies there, you could have access to. And it was a tech career fair. And I really feel like seeing not only other young folks who are recruiting, obviously, at the fair, but also folks who are out looking for those jobs it was a great way to create a lot of interest very quickly. First of all, believe it or not, you spent way over 30 minutes chatting today. So I wanted to thank you for joining us. We are definitely going to have you back, Marjorie, as 2022 gets into full swing and after sales kickoff, and as we're making thousands of great announcements, and you are continuing to grow your organization and yourself. And so thank you for coming on. I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me. This is a ton of fun.
All right. Take care.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.